Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 53 of the podcast. And today I'm chatting with Brenda LaFleur all about photography. So we've got a little bit of quilt photography and landscape photography all mixed in with a lot of tips and information about just shooting better pictures in general. And I think that a lot of this will apply even if you don't have a big fancy camera, a DSLR. But I have to say, looking at lots of photography over the years, and certainly this is something that I waited a really long time to build skill with, and I really regret that now. So I could say of all the things that I've learned in the last couple of years, becoming a better photographer has made the biggest difference overall with everything. So I hope that you take something from this podcast, and I hope it inspires you to learn a bit more about photography, and so you can document your quilts a little bit better. Now, if it's a little bit noisier than usual in the background, it is because I am outside in my side yard. This is the side yard where I put in this garden, and I am planting some herbs in my herb garden. And what you're hearing is my duck, well, Josh's duck, Daisy, and our chickens, which, you know, they were completely silent right until I stepped outside. And then of course they all decide to talk to me while I'm recording. So yeah, so you're gonna hear them a little bit in the background. And what I'm doing basically is just stirring up the soil, and then I'm gonna plant these herbs that really, with these podcast episodes, I just try and share what I'm actually doing. And this is one of those things where I know if I buy herbs and I don't get it in the yard that day, then they won't get planted and they'll end up dying in their pots. So this is something I'm bad about, killing plants in their pots. So I'm trying to be better about it and get them on into the garden. And I am not a big gardener, as you can probably tell. This is not my passion. Quilting is my passion, most definitely. I could not even find a trowel, so I am using, what is this? Well, it looks like a, I can't even think of the name of it. It's a pickaxe. I am gardening with a pickaxe. This is bizarre. Anyway, it doesn't matter. As long as it makes a hole, it's gonna work just fine. So there we go. So we're planting some basil and parsley. I always plant wet to wet, so I soak down the hole I just kind of dug out, and then plant that and bury it in. Okay, that's gonna look just fine. There we go. Looks like I might have needed to go deeper with that guy. Yeah, this is just one of those things that I know if I'd left it, wouldn't have gotten done. Okay, so I always kind of like to just give you a little update on what's going on around the house. And please understand, if you're listening to the audio and you like to see what I'm doing, then we also have this podcast available in video too, so you can watch me working in the garden and playing around and pulling my weeds. And so this is just part of the process. Okay, so there we go. And if you're wondering what these herbs are around me, I've got a really nice oregano here that's grown up really nicely this winter. And then this is thyme. So yeah, they stuck around and are looking pretty good. So what else has been going on? I posted the third post to Prism Path, and that is the Prism Path Baby Quilt Along. And we call it that because it's both a little mini short quilt along and because it's a baby quilt. So you can find that all of the Prism Path posts are linked up, and you can find them easily, leahday.com, and just search Prism Path and you'll be able to find it. And so this week what we did was we finished piecing the entire quilt top. So yeah, this has just been 3 weeks, and we've gone from, you know, prepping up our fabric and getting it ready to go. And then this week we have actually finished piecing the baby quilt completely. And so next week we will mark it, and then over the next 2 weeks we will quilt it with straight lines and then matrix, and then it'll be done. So 3 more weeks and this quilt will be out of here. It'll be finished up. And then of course we're continuing with our posts on Friday for the machine quilting party, and that is walking foot style quilting. So if you're interested in that, last week's post was pinstripe grid lines, and that was a lot of fun. But I had to apologize. I forgot to share it on social media because the very next day, so Friday I post those designs, and then the very next day we went to Heart Square. So if you've never heard of Heart Square, don't feel bad. I had never heard of it either. And I've lived in North Carolina my whole life. So basically, Heart Square is the largest collection of historical log cabin homes in America. And they were all collected by this guy named Bob Hart. And so it's kind of like how we collect sewing machines and fabric. Well, this guy collected log cabins. And then he started collecting all the stuff that goes with them to furnish them, to make them look complete and to fill them up. You know, so when you go upstairs in a house, you don't just see an empty upstairs, you see beds, and those beds are covered in linens and quilts, and there's bedside tables and tools. You know, he's gone to flea markets and antique stores all in the area and dug up and found all the tools that, you know, people that lived in log cabins would have had. And it's just, it was really magical. And it was magical in that way that like going to a Renaissance festival or some kind of festival like that kind of feels. It was magical in that same way, but this was, I think, even more magical because this is how we used to live, you know, and they have the history of each of the houses kind of printed up there right next to the door. And they'll have something written like one very, very tiny log cabin had like 10 children were raised here. And it really starts to blow your mind. Like, well, first off, 10 children were not raised in that house. They were raised outside. They just slept in the house. They might have eaten in the house occasionally in the wintertime, but they did not actually get raised in the house. But still, 10 children, you know, tiny, tiny, tiny log cabin. Really, I don't know, for me, it made me really feel appreciative to what I have, and also just really respect where we've come from. And that I think is really fascinating and important too. So yeah, that was so much fun. And the interesting thing about Heart Square is that it's only open a few days of the year. So this was just a special Founders Day event that they had, that we were hosting. And then they have Festival, which is in the end of October. And that's their big event where 4,000 people come and tour the log cabins. And they have reenactors and craftspeople demonstrating and docents telling about the history in every cabin. And yeah, of course, I sent them an email and said, I would love to come and do something with quilting, or I could spin, or I could knit, or I just put me to work. I would love to do something with that. So yeah, I hope I'm able to help out with Heart Square at some point. It was just like stepping back in time, and the quilts, I took lots and lots of pictures of the quilts because they were just gorgeous and all hand-pieced and hand-quilted, which I don't think 10 years ago I would have been able to know the difference, nor would I have been all that interested in the fact that those quilts took so much more time and energy to create. I have a lot more respect for the history now than I did before, and I think that just comes with time more than anything else. I did not see any treadle sewing machines there, but I'm probably sure that I missed the cabin. More than likely they've got at least one. They gotta have a treadle. Most of these log cabins were anywhere from, I think, the 1760s through into the late 1890s or so is what it looked like. But really, go and check it out, learn more about it, heartsquare.com. And it's really fascinating. Like I said, it's straight up a guy kind of got into it and began collecting log cabins, and now has over 100, I think. And they're just beautiful. So that was my fascinating pretty thing of the week, and I really find I needed that. I think I needed that little reset. I needed to step away from everything, and I feel like I've come back home kind of going, all right, need a little bit of a reset and to reevaluate. And it was interesting, on the way there, that we were listening to a book, and it was about what was it about? It's about priorities and being very focused in your work. And while I like some of the book, I'm not happy with all of it, because sometimes some of these books about business and marketing can be like, does this person live in the real world? You know, does this person actually understand what it's like to be a normal person? You know, please don't fuss at me about the way I'm pulling this tomato out of the pot. I think I just mangled it. At least Josh just drove off, so he won't be here to yell at me about it. Like I said, gardening is not my forte, but, you know, it's one of those things that I think if I get it in the ground quick enough and give it some water and put a tomato cage around it, well, it should be just happy. If I don't squash my squash plant, we'll be okay. And I don't know, maybe this will make you feel better. I'm not good at everything. Every once in a while I'll get an email like that. Are you good at everything? No, I'm really bad at gardening. That maybe is helpful. Okay, so a little update on Mally the Maker. I've been getting a lot of emails about that because I was cooking dinner last week and I forgot to share a lot of updates last week about many things, and so forgot to share about Mally, and that's going really well. Josh sent me, he finished up his edits, so he did the first round of editing and handed it back to me, and then now I'm going back through it, and that is a much slower and harder process than I expected, and it's taking a little bit more time than expected. So if you're an early reader, please remember my date was April 30th. That's probably going to adjust again. That's okay. I don't want to feel the pressure to push this out super, super fast. It's my very first fiction novel, and quite honestly, I need less stress, not more. And so I'm giving myself a break on that. You know, it is coming out soon. We'll put it that way, but it's not going to be tomorrow. You know, I reached about page 100 or so, and I was just really pushing hard to get the edits in, and kind of hit a wall where I was just working on it all the time. I was not taking time for family. I was not taking time for myself, and it was just becoming a problem. So I'm slowing down on that. I'm going to work one chapter at a time, then hand it off to Josh for second round of revisions, and just slow down. And you know, that's okay. Sometimes I just need to slow down, and that's what I just have to on that. And the same thing with my other posts and things that I was working on. I've got so many balls in the air, and it just, you know, it was interesting. This book said the word priority was singular, you know, and priority should be singular. It's one priority until it was singular until the 19th century. And then it became priorities. And we seem to believe that we could have more than one priority at a time. And I don't think we can. So yeah, Mally the Maker, the book, is my priority. It's my number one thing that I am working on as much as I possibly can. And so I am trying to spend as much time as I can on it. And the other things that I have in the air, while they are very important, you know, they're going to have to take a back seat to that. And, you know, and then move methodically on everything. And that's felt really good. I have so many things that I'm super excited about and, you know, really want to pursue. And I've had to just stop myself from racing off to go do those things. It's really easy when I get into this state on a book, because this is hard, that I start rushing off and distracting myself with easier seeming things like, oh, let's go design another book. You know, oh, let's start a fiction book or nonfiction book. You know, let's go write the next, you know, machine quilting book. And it's easy to get distracted and start to lose focus, because those things, you know, starting new is easier than finishing, at least for me, finishing what I already started. So, yeah, Josh has just been helping me kind of get back to our main priority, and then also taking some more time for myself and family and getting back to our family night. Haven't really been doing any embroidery, any handwork at all. So definitely looking forward to getting back to that. And this is just the nature, I think, of life. Like, things get busy and crazy, and then kind of have to pull back and check in, and then, you know, be outside and, you know, kind of get back to basics, and then things will get busy again. I think that's just how it goes. But yeah, I really enjoyed sharing this with you and being out in the garden and outside here, putting all these plants in, and yay, they're in, so they're not gonna die, hopefully. I did kind of mangle that tomato plant, so we'll have to see. So that's it for the introduction here, and everything I have to share with you today. If If you'd like to help support the podcast and help it continue, please come and check out my website at leahday.com, where you can find tools and supplies for machine quilting on your home machine, as well as books and quilt patterns and online classes that I have taught as well. So come and check that out at leahday.com. And now here's the show with Brenda LaFleur, all about photography. Hello, my quilting friends. Today I'm here with Brenda LaFleur. Welcome to the show, Brenda.
Hi there, Leah. I'm so happy to be here. It sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. I've been really looking forward to this too, because Brenda's going to be talking about photography. And I think everybody that listens to this podcast know that is my new thing. So a little introduction. She is a landscape photographer from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and she's also a quilter. She began her quilting experience many years ago as primarily a hand quilter. Her interest in photography has been long-standing as well. She enjoys landscape and nature photography. Southwest Louisiana provides a magnificent backdrop for her photography interests. So that's really what we're going to be chatting about today. And let's get started. Just what's on your camera right now? Like, what was the last photo that you shot?
Let me think. I had to go, I went to a workshop in neighboring town, Lafayette, Louisiana, and when I have the time, I take back roads whenever I have the opportunity to do that. And so I just look for, it's kind of dreary here now, and so the landscape itself is not all that beautiful, and so I look for interesting buildings or barns or horses or cows or whatever. So what's on my camera that actually hasn't made it to the computer yet are some barns and interesting windows and doorways and that type of thing. So one of my favorite things to do when I have the time is just drive the back roads. I have a photography friend, she and I laugh about, we call them pig trails. And so when we have a chance to go off down the pig trail, we'll go see what we can find. So that's what's on my camera right now. I live Lake Charles is on I-10 between about halfway between New Orleans and Houston. And so we're really about an hour from the Gulf, and so lots of streams and lakes. Obviously, Lake Charles is on a lake, and so I pay attention to what the sunset is going to look like every day. And I'm about 10 minutes from one lake and a park that's on a lake, and so if it looks like the sky is going to present interest for a sunset, then I head off to do sunset pictures. So there's usually some sunsets on my camera as well.
Oh, nice. So give me some tips on shooting a sunset. I've tried to shoot pictures of the sky before, and they always, the clouds don't come out. It always ends up, there might be like some really interesting dark clouds, and then they end up washing out. So what am I doing wrong?
Well, some of it, it may be the time of day. I mean, in photography, we talk about the golden hour, and so that's the 30 minutes before sunset, the 30 minutes after sunset. And that's when the sun has dipped low enough to the horizon or close to the horizon that you don't get the harsh shadows, harsh contrast. So that's maybe the one difficulty. It's that you're maybe trying a little bit too early, or there's too much contrast between the dark clouds and the bright sun, or reflections on water or whatever. And so I think that's the trick. Sometimes it's really waiting late enough until you have less contrast in the sky. The other thing I think that amateur photographers, myself included sometimes, is we just don't like using a tripod. And so that's really probably my primary tip is you got to have one, and you got to take it with you, and you have to use it. And so certainly, especially after sunset, things start to get darker. So if you're going to have a sharp, clear photo, then you really have to have a tripod, because you're leaving the shutter open for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and you just can't hand hold that and get a sharp photo. So those are probably my two major picks. Use a tripod, pick the right time.
Yeah. I was thinking you were going to tell me to use a magical lens. I'm using the wrong lens.
If you come across finding one of those, then let me know. But the reality is that if if all the concepts come together correctly, it really doesn't matter what camera you use. Now, I've got a lot of money in. I need to sit down and try to figure that out. I just thought I'm trying to decide whether to have more money invested in camera equipment or in quilting. It's probably a pretty close race, actually, right now. But I have a lot of money invested in my camera equipment. But I've taken beautiful photos with my iPhone. So, the best camera to have is the best camera is the one you have with you at the time. So I don't think it makes a lot of difference. I mean, I have some nice landscape lens, but you can take nice photos with any type of equipment, actually.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I shot all of the photos for my recent quilt book with a kit lens. What that is, just in case somebody hasn't heard of it before, a kit lens is the lens that comes with the camera. Usually it's kind of a standard cheapy kind of lens, but I've got great results with it.
Absolutely, and I would encourage you to keep using that. One good thing about the kit lens is that they're designed to go with the camera that you're buying. And so there's some great kit lens out there. And so I would encourage anyone that's looking into getting into photography equipment, buy what you can afford. I mean, buy the most expensive lens that you can afford. And honestly, lens are more important than the camera. You want to have a good camera, obviously, but put your money in lens. Lens are going to last forever. They just typically, unless you drop it on the concrete, which I've been known to do, they'll last for a long time. And so cameras, we're gonna, they have so many clicks in them, and eventually you're gonna want to replace them for one reason. One is the technology just gets better and better. And so, but again, buy a new camera. Dig out, make sure you can connect those old lens. So typically, when you stay with if you start with Canon, you're going to stay with Canon. If you start with Nikon, you're going to stay with Nikon. And there's some other brands out there that are good, but I would encourage most people to buy a Canon or a Nikon. It gives you, the opportunity to grow your collection of lens and be able to, and for them to be interchangeable.
Yeah, that's what I love. I have a Nikon. And and in fact, actually, I ended up buying two. I bought one and then ended up giving it to my son, and because he wanted to get into photography. And then I bought a second one, and I love that the lenses are interchangeable. I mean, it's like sewing machine feet, where all the feet.
Right, yeah. And the really cool thing is that what a great setup, because you can buy him a birthday present, Christmas present, and then you have access to the lens. So how cool is that? But I think zoom lens. Most amateur photographers, and again myself included, I want to have a good zoom lens that gives me a variety of shots, availability of shots. So from wide angle to and wide angle just means exactly what it sounds like. You're getting a wider view of the sunset or the landscape, whatever you're taking. And then telephoto is the opposite of that. If you're shooting birds, or you want to zoom in on a particular object, and then you want to have a long reach with your lens. And so there's some that really do all of that. So I think finding something that really fits to what your interest are is the most important thing. And I've bought and sold lens for, I thought, oh, this is it. This is the lens I want. I'll never want another lens. And then, what happens? A couple years down the road, I sell that one, and I thought, oh, now this is the lens that I want. So just like quilting, I mean, how much old fabric do we have in our stash that we thought we had to have it, and then something new comes out. Well, I can't wait to get that in my cabinet also. So
absolutely. So what's your favorite lens right now? I know that this will probably change, but right now, what's your favorite?
I have two basic lenses that I'm using right now, and one is a Nikon. It's a 16 to 80, and I don't know. Again, if you're not terribly interested in, if you're not terribly knowledgeable, you may not know what that means. But 16 is a wide angle, And so it's great for going to the park to do the sunsets or the vistas or the waterfalls in North Carolina, although that's not, I don't do very many waterfalls here below sea level. We don't have those. But it's, where you're going to get the landscape view of the vista of what you're looking at. And so that's the 16. 80 is kind of a mid-level. It's about what we're used to, like 50 millimeters that we took way before you were born, probably, Leah, actually. But that was, back then, 50 millimeter was kind of the standard, or 35 millimeter was kind of the standard photography lens that we see. So 80 is kind of a mid-range, and so that's my wide-angle lens. And then I have a telephoto lens that's a 300 millimeter, and it's a prime. Prime lens means that they're not zooms; they're just one focal length, and so it's my lens that we have a lot of water here, lakes and rivers and streams, and so I shoot nature photography, birds, or we have lots of pelicans. I'll shoot pelicans or egrets or whatever, and that's kind of my telephoto lens. And I like going to the zoo, so I do zoo animals sometimes too. So that's kind of my animal lens. It's a 300 millimeter prime. I had one lens that covered everything from like an 18 millimeter to a 300 millimeter, which is a wonderful, wonderful lens, but it's heavy. And I just got tired of carrying it around, and so I decided to kind of split that up, and I'll use the two lenses. Right now I have one on one camera and the other one on another camera. So if I'm going locally in my car, I just take them both in the car, and then I don't have to worry about changing the lens when I'm out in the field. If I were traveling, then I would take one camera body and the two lens. I also have another lens that's a 55 to 200, and it's a kit lens that comes with the Nikon 2-lens kit, a 55 to 200, and it's a great little lens. It's very light, it's very sharp. So I use it sometimes kind of in that mid-range. It's a good kind of walk-around lens if you're going to be in the city and taking, or in the quilt shop and taking photos of things that interest you or something that you may want to do. It's kind of fits that mid-range, and it's really light to carry around, and so I like it as well. So I don't know if you want me to talk more about, if any of our listeners don't know what the millimeters mean. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit more about that or not. I think have you done enough research yourself to kind of know what I'm talking about, or know what you're looking for, the type of photography that you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. It was something that totally mystified me at the beginning, and I was just and really intimidated by all of it.
Right.
But yeah, I learned a lot about all the f-stops and millimeters and all that good stuff.
Well, and good for you. Well, you really dug into it more than, so that's great.
Yeah,
and I do think that those things are so important because if you want to take your photography to that next level, that education is really good. I teach digital photography. My cameras are digital. I haven't shot film for many, many years. So I teach classes, and so many people like you get a new camera. Oh, wow, this looks great. But then, now what? What do I do? And what do all these buttons mean? And, how can I use this to get the best benefit? And so I encourage people to find a class, and there's tons of material online, just tons of material online to find a course or tutorials, YouTube, wherever. There's some great photography sites out there that that offer a lot of information. So I encourage people to do that. Sometimes it's kind of boring to read about it, I think, and it's hard to understand by just reading it. So I think finding something that encourages you to go out and try, shoot in this, to go to the one scene and take it using this f-stop, that f-stop, and look at the difference and see what you get. But you're not, you really have to get out and practice if you're going to develop skill with this hobby, just like quilting.
Yeah,
It looks
absolutely.
great. It looks great. You think, oh, I want to do that. And again, free motion quilting is a perfect example. That was this all came about because I commented to you. You teach me how to free motion, and I'll teach you how to take photos. But and they both require the same thing, and that's practice. And so we have to get out and practice. One more thing about photography, I think, really to develop. There's two parts to it, really. One is capturing the best image you can in the moment, and the second part of it is editing. And my photography really didn't go into another level until I learned how to edit. So what comes out of the camera often does not look like my final my final image, and particularly digital photography. It's just like in the day, the photographers, they did their editing in the darkroom. Well, so now we do it on the computer, but digital images have to be edited to some extent, and so I think that's the next step. I've invested time in classes, reading. Workshops in learning how to edit and using Photoshop. The first time I opened Photoshop, I don't know, 20 years ago, I just went, oh, I can't do this, and I just shut her down, and I didn't look at it again for probably 7 or 8 years, and I said, okay, I have to do this. If I'm gonna put money into this hobby, I'm gonna have to learn how to use Photoshop. And I teach Photoshop lessons in Lightroom, and again, all of that just comes with practice as well. But that's the next step, I think, in really learning how to edit your digital images.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't use Photoshop. I just decided to stick with Lightroom, just because I was working with the raw image file, and just exactly like you, Photoshop was really intimidating. I think that's still, it still gets the photo looking better. It's still,
absolutely, you're absolutely right, and you can do excellent editing with Lightroom. When I started this whole business, I didn't have Lightroom, and so your option was Photoshop, and there were other software programs that I used, and those have all kind of fallen by the wayside, and now they're still just Photoshop. Lightroom is an excellent. I use Lightroom as well. I use it as my organizational software to download my images, organize them in Lightroom. Lightroom has so many features for that in terms of helping you collect your photos, which would be great for you. There's a thing that's called collections in there, and so if you were collecting images for a particular project, you could tag those with that collection. They would go into a certain. You're not actually moving them on your computer. Lightroom is just connecting a link between those images and a particular title, and then you search for that title, and those images would all come up. If you were going to if you were working on a particular project, and you talked about things you have in the works, and so you wanted to save your photos for that, you just tag them with that particular link, and then you can on those, and so it's really easy to do that. So that's a great thing about Lightroom. The other thing that they're editing, let's see, the develop mode is what it's called, and so it has all its editing features that are typically kind of listed down the right side of the screen. They're just really easy. They're sliders, and they tell you what you're doing, and you can see the before and after. You can tell if what you're doing is working or not working. And it's real simple. I mean, typically you just go down the list and make adjustments as you need to. That basic adjustment that's at the most power is in that, in terms of, dropping down the highlights, or opening up shadows, or in saturating colors or whatever. There's just a lot of power in that. So I think Lightroom works great probably for, I don't know, whatever, 90% of photographers, honestly, and I only go to Photoshop then if I'm doing something, that like removing a power line from a photo, or there's a tree limb that's sticking in that I think it would look better if I take that out, or Photoshop has a lot of opportunity to work in like removing pixels, adding pixels, whereas Lightroom, you can't really do that. In Lightroom, you're working with what you have available in your image, and you're not really removing an element or removing a particular color, an object, those types of things you do in Photoshop.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. In working in RAW files, this is a type that you can shoot with your camera, and I had no idea anything about this when I first started shooting. But it, when you work in
research, then good for you.
Yeah, and so then now I have all of these amazing photos that are raw, and then I can edit them multiple times, and they'll never get downgraded. They'll never start to look blocky and pixelized. So
and it's another great thing about Lightroom. It never it doesn't touch your original image. It's just created. Actually, they're called little sidecars, and so all of the I can't think of the extension for it, but anyway, so all of the adjustments that you're making to your image are they're saved in a little file that's attached to that image. And so if you want to throw away all your adjustments and go back to your original image, you can always do that. And so it's non-destructive. That's what that type of editing is called, non-destructive. So you're never creating a problem, or you're never doing any destruction to your original image. And so that's a great thing. Using RAW, as long as you don't blow out your highlights, do you know what that means? If you're again, we're back to that contrast thing. If you're shooting a photo of a building and there's a bright sky behind it, and you choose your exposure to get the building so that you can see it, then that sky is likely going to be blown out. So, but as long as you don't blow out a highlight, if you have a raw image, all of your data is still there. And so if you just take the photo to still your original photo, that building may look dark, but you see the clouds and the blue sky, then Lightroom, you can open up the shadows. That's what that means when we talk about open up shadows. And you can bring light to that dark building, and you have a fairly well,
more balanced, right?
Yeah, there isn't a word for that, but right, balanced, so that you have, the dark building, you can see the detail in that, you can see the detail in the sky as well.
Yeah.
So, and you just don't want to have a photo where you blow out the highlights. And so that's usually bright whites, bright sky, bright blue sky, clouds. It's hard to not blow out clouds, when they're white puffy clouds.
Yeah. So your advice.
But also, we'll take two photos, and then you combine those together. So you expose. Exposure was what I was trying to think of a few minutes ago. Really, very, very primary photography term. But so you expose for the brights, and then you expose for the darks, and then in Photoshop you mix them, put them together so that you have a balanced exposed photo. So,
yeah, I've been playing around with this in the studio, actually. Auto bracketing on my computer, on my camera. I can set it up so that it shoots like one exposure too low, and then it shoots right in the middle, and then it shoots one exposure too high, and then combine those three photos together, and it seems to get it just exactly right. I love that.
I mean, really, our cameras are amazing. I think you get higher end cameras you can take. I bracket a lot. Some of them do. Mine, I can tell it to how many brackets I want it to take from. Can't remember the number, but I can do 3 or 5 or whatever, and so it'll do. Underexposed a little bit, less underexposed, and then overexposed a little bit, and then it does it. My camera doesn't put those together, but I put them together then once I get into my software. Excuse me. There are some like more point and shoot cameras that do that in camera. I have a little Sony that I use, just a pocket camera that I have it with me when I don't want to lug the other stuff around, and it does a great job. Our iPhones do a great job. There's some software programs that I've used in the past, but now it's kind of integrated into the camera with our phones, and they do that. High contrast is what it's called. HDR is what it's called. And they, will combine that image together so that you have a well-exposed photo. So there are a lot of options out there, even for the photographer that doesn't want to learn to use Photoshop. Then there are a lot of in-camera opportunities to do those things that weren't available 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I have to say, this has been the thing that I felt like was really holding my business back, and I'm so thankful that I bothered to learn it, and it ended up being so simple, and I had to laugh at myself after I bought my big camera that I had spent $700 on an iPhone, and I only spent $500 on a big DSLR camera, and I was like, well, I could have invested in this years ago, and I honestly feel like it was the best investment I could have made into my business. So let's talk about specifically shooting quilts. Do you shoot quilt pictures at all? Do you shoot your in-progress shots as you're working on a quilt ever?
I've just started doing that again. I had when we had talked earlier. When I first started quilting, again, that was, I don't know how long ago, a million years ago, 30 years ago or something. And I was really a hand quilter. There was no social media at that point. So I didn't photograph anything. I took a few snapshots of some, and who knows where those are. So I don't really have that saved necessarily. But when I started back again a couple of years ago, then, Facebook is what Facebook is, and Instagram is what Instagram is. And the joy of all of that for me is just having access to people like you, or seeing what other people, what other quilters are doing, and getting inspired by the fabrics that are available and the patterns that are available. So it's hard to not jump in the middle of that, with both feet. So I decided then, I'm partially retired now too, so I have a lot more time on my hands, and I'm quilting more. I'm doing more machine quilting rather than hand quilting, and so I'm producing a lot of quilts. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with these. I'm giving a lot away, but I'd love to have some money coming back in so I can buy more fabric. I mean, that's the only reason I would ever want to sell a quilt. It's just so I can buy more fabric and make more quilts. So I started looking, I really need to start recording these things and do a little bit more name recognition about what else I'm doing. I have that in photography here locally because I've done shows and I sell things and I make calendars every year with my photographs, but I kind of want to, and I don't want to have a big business, but I'd like to sell some along the way. So I said, okay, I need to start recording this and taking photos. And so I don't do as much in process probably as I don't do as much as I could, or maybe even as I should, but I really am, one goal for this year is to make sure that I have a quality photo of a finished product. So I've started doing that a little bit more, and again, tips about that. I think you can do it indoors. It's harder, your lighting is always going to be a challenge shooting indoors. So I would encourage most people to do outside photos in bright shade or on cloudy days, and those are probably going to be your best days to photograph anything, including quilts. So when I drive around town, I have my eye out for where is the location that might be a good place to hang a quilt or lay a quilt over a rail or a fence or whatever. The last group that I did about 2 weeks ago, I went out with the quilts that I had finished most recently, and I just drove around town, and there's one that hung over a fence here. There's a big church that's probably about 2 miles from my house, kind of out of town, that has these beautiful white railed fences all the way around the property. And so I'm like, that's on my list. And so I took a couple of photos there. So I'll probably go back to that location as well. And just some other things around town and rails to hang something over. Or we have all these beautiful old live oak trees that have the huge branches that dip down into the lower branches kind of grow heavy, and then they dip down into the ground. And so what a perfect place to lay a quilt. And so look at those type of opportunities. I bought a ladder. I had someone make me a ladder. We see a lot of photos of quilts now hung over the display ladders, and so the things that I saw available here locally, they weren't wide enough, and so I had someone build one for me that's a little bit. It's actually probably maybe a little bit too wide. It's like 28 inches wide. It's huge, and I'm going to use that in the backyard or on my patio, or in the yard when it's an overcast day, under the patio with bright light, and so those things. I think you think about you have it using props. Again, I've done a few indoors. I'm not as satisfied with the lighting. I think that's harder to accomplish. It's nice to see a quilt on the bed, but I think that's hard to photograph. I don't have a lot of ambient light, window light, so I think it depends on what each quilter has available in terms of lighting. But no matter. Lighting is very important when you're quilting, but it's equally important when in photography. I mean, that's the primary. It's all about the light. Your photo is going to be good, better, depending on the light that's available. So
absolutely.
If there are cloudy days, overcast, places where there's bright shade.
Yeah. I actually attached boards to the back of my house because it stays in shade. It's a south-facing wall, and so by the middle of the afternoon, I can shoot, and it's bright, but it's shaded, and that seems to work pretty good. Yeah, and I had an idea for simulating a bed, so that way you could see kind of judge how big a quilt was. And I'm thinking about getting a metal bed frame that will stay outside. It'll just be a piece of yard art. And then I will puff up an air mattress when I want to shoot a photo and make the bed.
That would be perfect.
Exactly.
And I think also, I don't, if you could take those props somewhere as well. I guess it depends on how, is hubby around to help and how big of a vehicle you have to travel things. But when you talk about that, I could just see that set up on the beach, or beside the waterfall, or in a field of wildflowers, or whatever. How cool would that be? To have that set up, your metal bed frame, your pumped up, your blown up mattress, and your new quilt. I think that would be cool. So I think fence posts are great. Again, I think looking for things are pretty grim and gray around here right now. But later on, looking for fields of wildflowers, or a fence post with the wildflower in the distance, or barn doors are great. I think that's another thing too. We have a really cool old country store that's not too far away, and they have. I've got to dig through and find those photos, because I've taken quilts over there a year or so ago, like out in the yard of this old. It's really an antique store now, and it's a place that the owner just displays his stuff that he's collected all these years. But they're all wringer washing machines, and so I've taken photos with my quilts kind of draped over the wringer washing machine, or he has some sheds, and I've hung them up there and taken them on the weathered wood, and has an old Chevrolet flatbed truck that's mostly rust, a lot of rust, field paint. They're great, draped over that. So I think just looking for those things, and I just make little notes to myself, that looks like that would be a great place, and try to remember to get back to that. I don't have them online now, either in Facebook or Instagram, as much as I would like, but I'm working on that. So that's kind of my inspiration for the year, to do a better job of getting that stuff posted.
Yeah, and I encourage you, maybe do a quilt calendar, a calendar with all of your quilt photos.
What a great idea. I hadn't even thought of that. That's a good idea. That would be good.
Yeah, well, let everybody know where they can find you online, so they can come and check out the photos you do have online. Really beautiful landscapes. I love them.
Okay, my Facebook, I have a business page that is, what is mine? If you just look for Brenda LaFleur Photography, I don't know what my Facebook name is. BrendaLaFleur.com. My Facebook is, if you just look for Brenda LaFleur Photography, I think you'll find it. Instagram, I just separated into two separate Instagram accounts, and I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure whether that's a good idea or not. So I don't know how that's going to work. But my regular photography Instagram account is BLaFleur1003, and that's where I first was introduced to you through that. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I separated, and I thought, one reason I wonder if the people, I wonder if most photography people are interested in looking at quilting stuff. And then I wonder if quilting people are interested in looking at photography stuff. And so I thought, well, maybe it would be better to separate them. And I'm not sure about that. So I have two. Anyway, the Instagram quilting is Quilter Brenda LaFleur. And I don't have a lot of photos there yet, but I'm working on that. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's better to have them separate?
Yeah, I would say simpler is better, and I have trouble keeping up with even one. So
that's kind of how that's what I thought, and I think if I want to look, I don't know. I'm still kind of undecided about what to do, but that's what I've done right now. They're separate. So there's Quilter Brenda LaFleur, and then BLaFleur1003, and I think my Facebook is BLaFleur1003 too. I don't know. After you set something up, it's kind of like I don't know what it is anymore, but I think that's what it is.
And that's okay. I think this is all a learning process. It's all a growing process. And I sincerely appreciate your time today sharing all about photography. I know I got a lot out of this. I really hope that quilters will dig into photography. I think it's something that everyone needs to build at least a little bit of skill with, because it makes such a big difference.
I agree with you. It's been a lot of fun, Leah. I've been looking forward to this, and so I admire your work and see so much inspiration from you and other young quilters like you, and it's just a joy for me to know that this hobby that I love so much and have been doing all of my life, which reminds me, the other thing that I really want to photograph are my grandmother's quilts. I have about 5, and I want to record those and have those on. But I'm just delighted to see that quilting is alive and strong. 50 years after I started quilting, and so I think that's really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And this is the question I always ask everybody right at the end, and that is, what are you most looking forward to in the next 5 years?
Continuing to enjoy my retirement. I'm a social worker by profession, a therapist, so I work 2 days a week, and then I have 5 days a week to pursue photography and quilting. And so I've been doing this about a year and a half, and so I'm really just looking forward to getting that routine down solid so that I'm as productive in all 3 of my areas as I want to be. I love to travel. Traveling. I plan all of my travel destinations based on my photography interests, and so I want to continue to travel as well.
Absolutely. That sounds like a wonderful life. I really wish you the best of luck, and I hope everything keeps going really great with your retirement.
That's great, Leah. Thanks a lot. I very much appreciate it, and of course the same to you as well.
Thank you. So that's it for this episode. If you'd like to find more episodes of the Hello My Quilting Friends podcast, check it out at leahday.com/podcast. We have a player that will play through all of the episodes shared so far, so you can binge listen for hours on end. Until next time, let's go quilt.